Hello, friends. This is Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the conversation series where I get a chit-chat with other writers. Before we get into today's episode, just a reminder, you can check out unboundwriter.com. That's unboundwriter.com. If you're an aspiring writer, struggling writer, or a writer who's just looking for some extra motivation, through Unbound Writer, I offer one-on-one writing coaching. I offer seminars and workshops and retreats. And I also have currently 3 self-guided online courses that you can choose to purchase and follow along with on that website. So check it out, unboundwriter.com. Today, I talked to my buddy. I talked to my friend, Barbara Nickless. So Barbara was on the show once before, and if you're interested in hearing kind of more about her journey and how she started writing, I advise you to go to my website, go to the Making It Up section, and episode 67 is my initial conversation with Barbara Nickless. But this time we just kind of talked shop. So Barbara and I know each other. We've known each other for a while. She's here in Colorado. She lives in Colorado Springs. And so through kind of that writing, the Colorado writing community, we've gotten to know each other. And she's just a fantastic person and an extremely talented writer, award-winning Wall Street Journal best-selling writer, mostly known now for her amazing series featuring Sidney Parnell. So please go to barbaranickless.com and you can check all of that out. But now she is back and she's written her very first standalone novel. A novel that we talked in decent depth about on the podcast. It's called The Drowning Game, an espionage novel that takes place largely in Singapore. So we discussed a lot about the challenges with writing something as technically and locationally nuanced as she has chosen to with The Drowning Game. But we also just talked about, hey, we got our book launches coming together. We're actually doing a joint book launch together in January. How do you prepare for a book launch? How do you deal with your PR teams? What are the things that you have to do and you're trying to not do too much of? So we went into the weeds a little bit on that. And of course, at the end of the episode, we made up a lovely little mystery story using a sentence from Cara Black's Murder at La Villette. So yeah, it was great to see Barbara. We actually have a bunch of events that we're doing together coming up through our mutual book launches. So I'm excited to see her again, and it was fantastic to spend a little bit of time with her today. You're going to love this one. This is my second conversation with Barbara Nickless. So we both have K publicity. So we have the same, and it's actually the first time I don't know, I don't a la carte my stuff with them, but I usually carve out somebody helping him with bookings and travel, because usually source books will do that. But this time I did decide to go that, and it's been great. And so now we have the same person who's like arranging events for both of us. And so now we're doing a lot of events together.
Yeah, and this is new for me. I've not worked with a PR firm like this, so it's taken some getting used to.
Yeah, and it's funny. Yeah, we talk about PR firms quite a bit on this podcast, but and I've always had one, like for all 10 books, and I've gone through several different ones, and you don't know what you're doing, so it's hard to select. I don't know, and you can't. It's really difficult / impossible to measure results. But my mindset has always been like, if you can afford it, why not give your book the best possible shot?
Exactly.
With people who know what they're doing.
Right.
Because you think you can just post on social media ad nauseum, but the problem is it becomes ad nauseum. And what the results of that are, I don't know. When you have a PR firm, they're going to say, hey, we are sending ARCs out to these influencers who have 50 or more thousand followers who are going to write a review. And I'm like, okay, I wouldn't have been able to do that on my own. Mm-hmm. So I've been real happy with K. Obviously the flip side is it's expensive, and prices continue to go up, and you got to really
right. And again, and you still don't know exactly what your results are. Your
No.
results may vary. How
Yeah.
good are you at following directions, like when they recommend you do things on social media?
I'm good because I that's what I tell them is like just tell me what to do, point me in the direction, give me instructions, and I'll do anything I'm asked to do. So I do stay quite a bit on top of that, and I try to do stuff on my own anyway. Like I just made a book trailer just because it's fun for me. I don't think it has.
Okay, you're putting me to shame.
Well, no, I don't think it has. I think the efficacy of it is high at all. But I'm like, I just like playing around in Canva and making little videos and stuff like that. Um, but I think the harder thing to do is stay on top of what they're doing. Because the first question is, should I? Does that feel like I'm stepping on people's toes? And this applies, I think, to your own in-house PR and marketing. But I also just want to know, like, what are you working on? Like, what should I be doing? Or can you give me an update? But you're not in the company. You're not an employee. So it also feels a little bit like, do I have the right to do that? And I think the answer is
Right,
yes, you
right.
absolutely have the right. But it still feels a little bit weird because they don't report to me. So it's like if I'm saying like, well, you said you were going to do this and I haven't seen that, it's weird. So
It is weird. And now, do you have an agent or do you work directly with a
no, I have
person?
an agent. Yeah, I've been with the same agent for 21 years. Um,
Wow.
I know,
Very
very
well.
rare.
Yeah.
She, you know, I don't go through her much for things like PR marketing. I will go to her if we feel like, regardless of who the publisher is, if we feel like, hey, that last book didn't, I feel like we didn't get the support we were told.
Mm-hmm.
She's the one that will reach out to my editor, for example, and just say, can we talk about this? But I'm the one who's arranging calls between my PR, K Publicity, and then my in-house PR, and then we have a group call, and you do this, I'll do that, and um,
Okay, I need to get on it.
well, just because I don't know, because the last thing I want is them to be like, because I always talk to my PR, in-house PR person first, and I'm like, hey, are you okay if I do this? Are they going to be or is it a pain in the ass for you? I don't know. I assume they're taking work off of your plate, and we all know how stretched these poor people are. So she's always like, yeah, that's great. And then, but the division of labor is important, right? Because you don't
Hmm.
want them both reaching out to the same periodicals to see if they'll do a review or whatever.
Right.
But I don't know. It's
Although
all
it'd
a
be
crapshoot.
okay if they both put up an ad on, in New York Times Square. That would be okay.
Totally. Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
great. And then they
Yeah.
don't charge you for it.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's so I mean, and every year, not every year, but every book, I do think about it. Like, do I invest this money again? And because it's a tough call. But I've been real happy with K because they're very analytically driven. So I do like that. And then I do a lot of stuff on my own, like Facebook ads and things like that, just for not for my book so much, but for my writing company. And it's hard to measure
That makes
results on that.
sense.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm trying to, since I left my corporate job, you realize like it's really hard to make a living, or at least the living you were used to, writing, just purely writing.
Yes.
So what else do? You do public speaking, you do, in my case, writing courses, all that kind of stuff and coaching. And then that's a business, and you got to figure out how do people even hear about this. And it's exciting, but it's also, I'm not used to it.
Terrifying. Well,
Yeah.
when did you quit your corporate job? Because I think the last time we sat in a bar together, you were still
Yeah, a
in that
couple
world.
years ago. Well, I was let go. I ran this consulting division for this hospitality data company for years and years and years.
Oh,
A group of us, and we got acquired by a $25 billion firm, and
yeah.
they just got rid of all consulting throughout the company. So it was actually a very amicable breakup. Great severance and stuff like that. And you go through this period of time where you had been making a lot of money and then or good living, and your book income wasn't great, but it was like okay. and now all of a sudden you're like, this is my income. So your first reaction
Right.
is, well, I got to get another job. And myself and my number two person who was also let go, she and I she's in New Hampshire. We kind of looked at companies together for a while. And then finally we decided like, hey, do you want to just create our own company? So we did that. So I have another company that does hospitality
Oh,
consulting.
wow.
I'm trying to figure that shit out too. Like trying to like, how do we get clients? How do we set up credit card payments? How do we,
You
so,
must be learning about a lot of stuff you never thought you would.
yeah, it's been a very entrepreneurial past year and a half, but I tell people, I'm like, I'm working harder than I've ever have. I'm making less than I ever have, and I'm happier than I've ever been because it's
Yeah.
exciting and there's something about it. And this ties in directly to writing. And I'm sorry I'm doing all the talking here, but there's something about working for your own vision and not for
Hmm.
somebody else's vision,
Hmm.
which is what writing books afford all of us, right? We sit down to write and we're like, yes, this will have input and I'm going to make changes, but right now, this is completely from my own instinct and my gut and my own enjoyment.
Absolutely.
So,
Uh, yeah, I mean, there's I think still a marketing angle when you pitch ideas to your publisher or when you're trying to narrow down ideas.
see, I've never done that.
Oh, so what do? You just write and
I
hand it
just
over?
write, I write a book and so I'm 70 now. I think today I hit 77,000 words in something that my agent doesn't even know what's about. I haven't told anyone really what it's about because I don't know for most of the time what it's about because I'm not plotting. So I don't want to tell them something. And you're afraid you're going to tell them like I'm 30,000 words and they're like, that sounds like a terrible idea.
Yeah.
So I just write it and hope, but the key is to write something that brings me joy and that I'm like, this is exciting to me. It might be a total failure, but it's the only way I know how to do it.
Because you're doing it outside of a contract.
Yeah,
Is
I
that
mean,
right?
I have
Okay.
had a two book deal, but most of mine are just spec. And, I've been fortunate that, this is my sixth book now with Source Books that's coming out. But I just co-wrote a YA thriller that, I have no
Ooh.
idea what's going to happen with that. It might be nothing might happen with it. And same with the book that I'm working on now. So I just like it's just that's all I know how to do.
Well, and I get that because even though I pitch an idea, it's a paragraph, and
Right.
get a contract based on that, I don't hold myself to that. And I gave my agent a bit of a heart attack when I turned in The Drowning Game because
Hmm.
her vision of that book is set mostly in Singapore. That
Yeah.
came as a
Oh,
real shock to her. She thought it was
yeah.
all going to be set in the US and
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
audience. So, um, and I think my editor at Thomas and Mercer is just used to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that could be true. And I did want to ask you about that, but I'm curious, when you just with the idea conversation, a paragraph could end up being anything, right? Like here's the paragraph,
Hmm.
we're paying you this much, which is a weird thought too, but you can only do that because you have history and reputation.
Right.
Um, and previous previous payments where there's kind of an understanding of kind of where we're at with everything. But then right, like an 85, 95,000 word document is going to be very different than in one paragraph. The hook might be there. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, because I was like, so first of all, Drowning Game, is this your first non Sidney Parnell book?
No, but it is my first standalone and it's my first espionage spy thriller.
Got it. So
Like,
you're, yeah, so you're like entering the world of and I was reading about the Drowning Game and I'm like, Jesus, this looks like it was really hard to write because first, I mean, espionage in general, like you got to know your shit, and like I'm so impressed. And then, like you said, set in Singapore, not only set in Singapore, but actually taking place in multiple locations. Um, and I'm like, oh man, that's that's a lot of work. Now, I mean, I know we all have Google Earth, but I'm assuming you're well traveled. And but is Asia Pac kind of an area that you've spent much time?
I spent time in Singapore.
Okay.
I knew I had to go there. I didn't make it to the Monaco Yacht Show. I couldn't even afford to like throw a tent by the curb in
Right. But did you go to
Monaco.
Singapore for this book?
Yes, I
Oh, that's
did.
so cool.
It was so fun.
Write it off.
And I felt like yeah, can write it off, and I felt like a real writer.
Yeah,
Boots
totally.
on the
This is what
ground
real writers
research.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And I mean, I started out as a journalism major in college, and so um, I kind of imagined that would be my life. And then I
Yeah.
switched to English lit and novel writing. So I'm
Yeah.
really excited I could kind of bring those observational skills still line up,
Yeah. I
whatever
mean,
you're writing.
I talked to a lot of writers who are former journalists, and the training just extends so many in so many different ways, how to write succinctly, how to
I
get
haven't
to the
learned that,
point.
but yeah.
Oh, well, that's called editing. Yeah. Um, but and you had this idea, obviously, because you wrote this paragraph that sold the book. Um, but was it kind of like, for me, if I have an idea, it's going to be, at most, it's going to be whatever the inciting incident is, whatever the hook is. I won't know anything more than that. But did you know kind of, yeah, have a general idea of what this is going to be? Obviously, you didn't tell them it was going to be in Singapore, but in your
I
mind,
didn't
was it?
know.
You
No,
didn't
I
know
didn't
that.
know. Yeah,
So where did
I
that all
actually,
come from?
I'm not well, I shouldn't say I'm not sure. I the whole idea for the super yacht industry, which is the backdrop to this book, came
Right,
from
which
an
is
article
fascinating, by
in the
the
New
way,
York. It is
because
fascinating.
somebody's building those boats, and
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
major business with a bunch of shady oligarchs
uh,
and everything else.
yeah. I mean, it's a whole world I didn't know anything about. And this reporter for the New Yorker, Evan Osnos, wrote an article called "The Haves and the Have-Yachts,"
Hmm.
and and that says it all. I mean, there's plenty of people, wealthy people, but even in that group, it's only the top, you know, point zero whatever percentage, the ultra high net worth individuals who can
Right.
afford to build and maintain a super yacht. So it was it was fascinating looking at the lives of these people, and it was logical to look at Russian oligarchs because their yachts have been in the news, right? As they're impounded by countries that
Right.
then can't afford to
Right. And that's been in
maintain
the
them.
news, right? We're
Yeah,
seizing this yacht. Well, we got to figure out where it is first.
right. And then how it can cost a couple $1 million a year just to dock it.
Wow.
So yeah, so now they're dealing with the repercussions of that. But I didn't want to go Russia, so I looked at the next place, and Asia is really growing in terms of those ultra high net worth individuals, and we've been on this. The U.S. has been on this issue with China for so long, right? There's a lot of territorial disputes going
Right.
on in
Yep.
the South China Sea that we're getting involved in. So it seemed like a natural place to go. I didn't know anything about China. I didn't know anything about Singapore,
Hmm.
but it was really fun learning.
Yeah, in Singapore, I've never been to Singapore. I've been to a lot of parts of Asia, but Singapore,
Mm.
I'm guessing is very um, easy to, as a starting country,
Yes.
to go visit and to explore. Unlike China, where it is much more difficult to communicate. First of all,
Right,
depending
right.
on where you go now. But I've only gone somewhere for research once, and that was kind of on my own whim. Like in terms of flying, it was just New Hampshire, Manchester, New Hampshire, and it was great because it let me get a sense of the place. But if
Yeah.
I were to be completely honest with myself, could I have not achieved that same thing digitally? I don't know. Probably not completely, but I don't know if my book was so much better because I had been there. And so you go to Singapore, and this very specific industry. Are you trying to make inroads, get interviews with people who work for these companies that build these boats, or with potential buyers or owners? Like, what do you do?
I did do that, although that I confined to the US. I did a
Got it.
drive-by of the shipping yards, the facilities in Singapore, but mostly I was there to really get that sense of immersion.
Yeah.
to actually stand in the places where my characters are, to understand the sights and the sounds and the smells and how to ride the subway and all of that. So
Mhm.
the yacht stuff I was able to do long distance for
Yeah.
the most part.
Yeah.
And I'd
That's
also visited a shipyard in Egypt. So I at least had,
good.
I know,
Because why
weird.
not?
Why not? You're in Egypt. Um, and that was, so that laid some foundation for me to start knowing what questions I needed to ask and what things look like.
Was Egypt a targeted destination as part of this research, or you were on holiday and you just did it anyway?
Yeah, I was on holiday and it
Okay.
was it was a side tour and of
I,
course
I've heard
whenever
that
I'm
that can be a tough
anywhere,
place to visit.
it was yes. I mean, I'm very interested in current events in Egypt, and that was a little bit hard to take some of what's
Hmm.
going on, and the
Yeah.
whole joy that came up after the Arab Spring, and then the disillusionment that followed.
Followed. Yeah.
Um, that was hard, but it was truly stunning to stand in front of those monuments that I'd only seen on a PBS special, or the
Right.
Discovery
Right. Oh, I
Channel, and
can
like,
imagine. Yeah.
wow, it's real.
Right. Totally. It is.
Yeah.
It's always different. And I always felt the same thing with like Machu Picchu, for example. Like I've seen photos of this
Mm,
a million times, and you get there, and it's totally different because it's visceral,
yeah.
and it's dimensional for the first time. Um,
Dimensional. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
um, so you come back home. So I assume all of this took place. These journeys took place either early on as you're writing or before you start writing.
Actually, no, I had to fill in the blanks. So I
Oh,
ended up going to Singapore in August. So about halfway through the process, the book was due early January. So I could write the other scenes. And then I did. I used Google Earth for Austria and Monaco.
yeah.
Um,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
and videos. I mean, it's so much easier now. I could sit there and
I
watch videos of the Monaco yacht show.
Yeah, I
And
know. It is great. Although the flip side of that is it's much easier for people to call you out if you get it wrong.
we're not talking about that.
I mean my goal, and I don't do a lot of research, so that's not a big concern of mine, but if I'm playing with something and I'm like, does this sound realistic? I'm like, if 70% of the readers buy this, I'm happy. Depending on what it is, if you have somebody who's hardcore specialist who
Right.
does what your protagonist does, they're going to find stuff, and that
It
happens.
yeah, no matter how careful you are. I mean, I am really a stickler for getting it right. That's super
Right.
important to me. I
Yeah.
I don't know. I was just always the good student in
Right.
school or
And
something.
you probably like it. You probably enjoy the
I
research.
do. I
Yeah.
do. I really
I
do.
hate it.
And so as much, oh, well, I need
To
to
me,
learn to
it feels
write
like
like you
homework.
because writing a book in a year when you're doing so much research, oh, it's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
But I vetted this through the intelligence community, this book. I
Hmm.
vetted it through the yacht community. So I'm sure people will find errors, but they should be pretty small.
So when you say you vetted it through, for example, the intelligence community, that means you have some kind of contact within the intelligence community who has agreed to, if not read the entire book, read the scenes that you're most concerned about. Was that difficult to establish those kind of relationships?
No, just because I've been building them for years because I'm so
Okay.
interested in that world anyway. The whole world,
Mhm.
the whole intelligence community to me is fascinating. So
Yeah.
I'd already it'd been a hobby.
Yeah.
So I did have some connections. I did have to work to find somebody who had been in active in the CIA. That took a little more work.
Yeah. You
Um,
you can't just post that on Craigslist and expect to
you
get
know, I mean, you might get answers, but
they probably won't be from the people you really want to talk to.
exactly, exactly.
That's
And that's always
fascinating.
intimidating. It's
Right.
intimidating to approach people and I'm just a novelist and I know you're really busy and you're doing these amazing things and would you read my book?
But I think it's also probably a little fascinating for them too, to be like, I get to have an input on somebody who's really trying to get this right. And, that's probably, the only, I once had a second, because most of my characters don't have crazy specialties, right? But I once had a secondary character who had his own POV, who was a detective. And I have a friend who's a detective, so I could feed him the pages, and that was
Oh,
great.
nice.
That was great.
Yeah.
And I think he liked being part of that process too. But other than that, I think it's research to me is just like it's just I think I have a fear of getting it so wrong, and I
Mm.
think I'm also lazy. So between those two things, I'm like, well, why can't
Well,
this
it's
person just be like me?
it's serving you well. It's working for you, Carter. Just run with it.
Well, and it's also you realize over time what you're interested in writing. Because, for
Yeah.
example, I love espionage books. I remember, when I was younger, I would just consume Tom Clancy novels like Cardinal of the
Mm.
Kremlin, and and but the idea of like writing that to me, I'm like, that just doesn't feel fun to me at all because it feels like too much or my friends who write historical fiction.
Right.
That's
Huge.
so
That's
it's
scary.
so impressive to me.
It
um,
is. But I'm such a nerd.
yeah.
I got this idea from Scott Young, who's a productivity maven, and he put himself through a master's degree from MIT just by getting the curriculum and then doing it on his own. And
Wow.
so I'm doing that now with intelligence. This is
That's
what a nerd I am.
that's amazing.
And I love it. I just
Yeah.
absolutely love it. If I could just do that, if somebody would just pay me
Right.
to learn, that would be great.
That's yeah. Well, that's a good sign for a writer because a lot of those tools are necessary. And I'm curious about your transition from series to standalone. Because I've never written series, and I think about it from time. I mean, I never actively exclude it. I just
Right.
and I do have crossover. I do have world
You
building. I do
do.
have Easter eggs and all that kind of stuff. But never like this character is now the same character. Now going the other way, you have all the freedom in the world. You're not committed to any character, but you've got nothing. You've got to start from
Yes.
scratch,
Right.
and you're doing all this research, and you've got a pretty limited timeline to do all this. Were you was there ever a point while you're writing the Drowning Game where like it would have been easier just to do another book in the series, or was it just like this feels so free, this is flowing?
Well, to your first question, I was going to say, yeah, every hour. But it really was both. It was,
Yeah,
I had so much fun writing this book because I wasn't bringing anything into it and I didn't worry about carrying anything forward. Now, my
yeah,
biggest concern, and maybe you struggle with this too, is making sure that none of your characters are too much like characters in your other books.
yeah.
So I didn't want Nadia to be like Sydney from my first series.
Right.
And and yeah, I just that was a concern. I think it was fine, but
Totally.
yeah.
Totally. The voice is difficult, right? Because I will say I think because I tend to write not always but tend to write one singular point of view per book, first person present tense. So it's their intimate voice.
Hmm.
Now, can I make that different than the same slight
Right.
general age, gender of a similar character in another book? I don't know. I think if you read them side by side, you'd probably say these two characters sound that they have similar ish voices. And I think it's a struggle if you have multiple POVs in one book,
Yeah.
regardless of who they are, to make them sound disparate. Did you find yourself kind of running into that, or did you go back to your Sydney books and say like, she would have said it like this, so I'm going to make sure my new character says it differently?
I didn't, and it turned out to be a lot easier than I thought just because their backgrounds are so different. So I think
Yeah,
in your books you're going to have some similarity because this is just modern day America, right?
yeah,
We're all enmeshed in the water of that culture. These
right,
things are familiar to all of us.
right,
In this case, the difference between somebody who'd grown up poor, served in war and mortuary affairs versus somebody who'd grown up wealthy and and was raised, had to go to cotillion and take ballet lessons so that she could always present herself a certain way.
Mhm.
I think Nadia and Sydney would really enjoy each other, but boy, they are polar opposites.
Yeah, I find that's fascinating. I have such admiration for people who do really like when I'm reading a book, I'm like, all right, I totally visualize this person and they are exactly yeah, as the book describes, and they don't sound like the other characters in it.
Yeah.
It's a terribly difficult thing to do, and I think it's not even really, if you consciously try to do it, I feel like it never tends to work. I think it just takes a lot of writing, and then you get a sense of like, because it's small things, right? It's like this person doesn't use as many contractions when they speak as this other person. This
Hmm.
person, this is their vocabulary is 20% advanced compared to this. What is that? How do I manifest that into actual words in a page? And you just have to get a sense of it over time, and you have to get somebody then to read it and say like you got it or you didn't get it.
I have no
um
idea who's talking here. No,
right,
in the dialogue, right?
right.
Um, do you ever? So to me, it's a little bit of method acting. I've just been poking into. I want to write an essay on the whole concept of method acting for writers.
Yes,
I
I
mean,
think
to
that's
me,
great.
it's so much about getting into their head. And yes, you can make those conscious decisions about whether they use contractions or not, but far deeper than that is really residing, looking at the world through their eyes, residing in their mind in situations, So I mean, make a joke out of if Sydney and Nadia walked into a bar with a dwarf, which is the character from my second series,
Yeah.
it's they're going to see very different things.
So does that mean do you like kind of board your characters? Do you like, okay, I know exactly what they look like. I know all of their history, whether I use it in the book or not.
Hmm.
I've created this vision board of this character. So, and I think that kind of goes to method acting. Like I'm going to assume this character and inhabit them. So I need to know everything about them before I even write the first word.
No, and my approach is different. I
Okay.
I I don't know a lot about them and before I start writing. And I used to try and fill out those character sheets.
Yeah.
And that's the research I hate. I
Right.
cannot do. That's just like what is their deepest, darkest secret and what is their
Right.
favorite movie? And it I can't do that. I mean, it might come out over the course of writing the book. I
Sure.
mean, obviously their deepest, darkest secret, that has to come out. But no, my approach is I guess more organic than that. And so right now, my next two books are the start of a series. I'm back to serial killers, working with the FBI, and which has been interesting. And I'm reading all these books about psychopaths and serial killers. And
Sound like my daughter.
oh my God, well, keep an close eye on her. It's
she,
it
she loves that
seeps
stuff.
into you in creepy ways, but
Yeah.
it is a bit of that method acting because I'm starting to think, okay, what are my killer's motives? Why is he doing this? What does he think about himself? It's not a really attractive place
Yeah.
to inhabit.
Yeah.
It's like a
Totally. No.
cesspool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because sometimes it's so funny when you read stuff like that, and a lot of it is unusable in a way, or just, the typical serial. But then you see like there'll be that one sentence where you realize like he did
Yes.
something. And it might not even be something horrible. It might be something that feels so weird and out of character that just hits you like that. I'm using that because that's so strange. And that hit me in such a visceral way it speaks volumes somehow. It's those little
Hmm.
nuggets that you
It
learn
is.
and
It
that's what you
is.
read a whole book is for one or two little nuggets.
You're right, exactly. It'd be nice to have a fast track on that. But a story that really stuck with me is Hilary Mantel. So she wrote the historical Tudor series set in
Okay.
England, Wolf Hall, Bring Up the Bodies. BBC made a mini series out of it. She's an
Okay.
unbelievably fantastic writer. And before I had read her works, I was reading an article where she talked about trying to figure out who her character was. And she was writing letters to him, but she just could not zoom in on this character.
Hmm.
And then she just imagined him coming in the room to sit down and talk to her. And he went to a chair and he tested the strength of the chair because this character, who's a historical figure, is huge. He's immense.
Hmm.
And he couldn't be sure that that chair would hold his weight. And she said, in that moment, I had him. I knew how he walked through the world. I
That's
knew what
so
it was like to
interesting.
be him. Isn't that cool?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is cool. And I think those are the intangibles that really do bring the character to life. If you were to ask me, your main character right now, 77,000 words in, what does she look like? I don't know. I don't really, I have this very
Yeah.
watery idea
Same.
of her. I never describe her anywhere in the book. You don't know what race she is, what color her hair is, whatever.
Hmm.
Because to
Hmm.
me, I want the reader to fill in those blanks for
I
themselves.
100% agree.
And also,
Yeah.
I'm lazy. Going back to the lazy thing, I'm like, I don't know, because if I say blonde here, then I'm going to forget because I don't go back and read. I don't know what I'm doing.
Exactly. Right,
Um,
right.
but but I will know how she'll react if somebody says something off-putting to her, because I know what's her past is like, and I know things that
Yeah.
trigger her. But I'm like, I have no idea how
And
tall
that's
she
what
is.
matters. Yeah, that's what matters. Yeah.
Right, right. I mean, I think so, but yeah, I remember like one of my proposed book covers showed a woman in a raincoat, and there was no rain in the book, so I'm not sure why she was wearing a raincoat, but she had long blonde hair spilling out over
That
the back of it.
espionage thing. You were
Oh,
sliding
is
that
that what?
in.
A bright
Yeah.
yellow raincoat? I
Oh, no.
don't know.
Never mind.
And she had blonde hair, and I asked my editor, I'm like, why is she, who is that? And she's like, well, that's your protagonist, Alice. I'm like, why is she blonde? Well, she's blonde. I'm like, she might be blonde. I don't know. And she's
Oh,
like,
that's
she's
great.
not blonde. I'm like, I don't know. But I love that you saw her that way. So I don't know.
Uh, Very interesting.
It's all just trying to, and I feel like you and I, like you get to what number book is this for you, Drowning Game?
Eight, eight.
8. So you get to this place where you've written enough books and you kind of just stop second guessing yourself. You're just like, this is how I do it. It doesn't always work out great, but this is like my method. And this is how I find joy in the act of writing. Because I remember early
Yeah.
on, I would just be like, do I write it like this? Do I do third person past tense? Do I? And now,
Hmm.
like, more recently, when I have second guessed myself, it hasn't gone well. Um, so
Can you
I,
give an example of that?
yeah. So Father, She Went to Find, my last book,
Hmm.
protagonist, 21-year-old, um, savant, female in 1987. And I set out to write it. And when I first set out to write it, she was 18. But I'm like,
What color was her hair?
I have no idea. And
Kidding.
I'm like, first person present tense is what I do. That's my voice. And it took me 5 books to realize that, but that's my voice. I'm like, I don't know if I can do that because I don't think I can get that close to this person who's so different than me. And so I wrote the whole thing third person past, not realizing what I was doing is I was like making this character who was hard to get close to anyway, even further away.
Oh,
And so my editor's
interesting.
like, what the fuck is this? I'm like, I don't know. So I
Is there
rewrote
a
the
problem?
entire book, first person present, which took me
Wow.
4 months to do. Um,
Wow.
because it was a great exercise to go through because you're sitting
Hmm.
there. It's so fascinating. Like you realize like, it's not just about replacing the verbs and
Uh-huh.
it's like the voice completely changes. And I was like maybe 5 pages into it. I'm like, should I just start with the blank screen and have my printout and just write
Yeah.
from scratch, or should I actually try to do each one of these sentences? And I went with the latter because I think that it ended up being easier. But you're gutting it. It's a you're
You are.
gutting
I
it
mean, I went from
entirely.
third person to first person with the Drowning Game when I was
Oh,
about three-fourths of the way through.
so
So
same
I
thing.
understand
Yeah.
completely. I mean, not quite as dramatic as because I didn't change my tense.
Oh, okay.
But you changed your tense,
I
right? You had it
changed my
third person
tense.
past tense. Yeah.
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 Oof.
But you miss stuff, and that's where the copy editors really
Yeah.
are helpful because
Thank
it's just
heavens.
like, I know. So do you see with this launch of the Drowning Game being your first standalone, but being with the same publisher, Are you seeing anything different? Are you seeing it being treated differently? Are you more on pins and needles to see what, you know, Goodreads says and, the trade magazines?
Yeah, I mean my publisher's treating it the same. So right now it's in Amazon First Reads. They're
Yeah, so
they're
you're
early
getting the
release to
thousands of
Prime.
reviews
Yeah,
before it
well, not
launches.
quite, but um so and they've done that for me before. So that was the
That's great.
same and I'm so grateful to them for doing that and for supporting my books that way. But yes, I've been nervous because it is a completely different genre. Did I pull it off?
Right,
And that's
right,
always the fear. And trying to not compulsively check
right. I
the
know.
reviews. I mean, I've gotten pretty good at that before
Yeah.
this book, and then this book, it's been harder.
Yeah, my method is to, because I'm a data person, so I like to see quantity because that's a reflection on early readers and how popular the book might be.
Hmm.
And it's so that's fascinating. I'll read the first 20 to 30 Goodreads reviews as they kind of come up just to see like, okay, what's the baseline here? Clearly, I'm going to read any trade reviews I get, and those are harder and harder to come by. Like,
Yeah. Oh my
Book
gosh.
List
Yeah.
and Publishers Weekly. Publishers Weekly didn't even look at my last book.
Same.
And I talked to the PR team. They're like, yeah, that's just how it is now. And so I'll read any of those, obviously. But then, once it gets more than that, then I'm just kind of looking at the numbers out of curiosity rather than digging into the one thing that I will do is I will go into with this book that's coming out because there's QR codes in the book that link to videos
Oh,
that I had made for the book, like scenes that I hired an
oh,
actress to do. Um,
clever.
and there's a little tiny paragraph at the beginning saying, hey, if you run across these, this is what they are. So my acknowledgments are a video, for example. Um, and I will go and then I'll go to Goodreads and I'll just like query in the reviews QR to see, are people talking about this? Is anyone even looking at this? Because I can kind of track every time somebody scans it. And so the adoption rate's very low, which is what I expected. But are they working? That kind of a thing. So I
Yeah.
might I
And
might look within reviews, but not just go down the rabbit hole of just reading review after review.
yeah, and then you can do a search on specific
Right.
keywords.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Can
Because
they
it is.
hire assistants for that? Like a personal assistant to do that? I don't know how you get it all done, Carter.
That would be too expensive.
I know.
I Well, so in the book, the woman is a podcaster, and she always records her side of the conversation with an iPhone. So I'm like,
Yeah,
I
makes
was
great
writing that in. I'm
sense.
like, I want to see what this looks like. And this reader had reached out to me like a year earlier because she liked one of my books, and she's an actress in Hollywood, and she's got some great credits. So I just emailed her, and I'm like,
Oh,
hey,
nice.
if I give you some money, can you just, and all you got to do is your iPhone because that's what the scene is, and it's just the same dialogue, and I just want to, it amuses me. So I'm like, I want to see what this looks like. And I'm
Love
like,
it.
oh, I'm putting this in the book, and and then I packaged it as recovered evidence from the Vermont State Police. So it's got the Freedom for Request Act in there and stuff like that. So if you down, but maybe 1% of readers are going to do it. But I'm like, but if they do, that'll be cool.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. You're starting a trend, I'm sure.
I don't know.
I think
But
over
it was
time
fun.
it'll build.
It was fun to do. Well, I'm excited to do a lot of these events with you, and we need to wrap up soon. Before we do, what comes next is our storytelling part of the
Oh,
show.
storytelling.
Did
Oh,
you
no,
forget? Did
yeah.
you forget that this was a part of the? I don't remember what we did last time. It
I
was a
don't
couple
either.
years ago,
Something
but
about a house, leaving a house. I don't remember.
to refresh your mind, I've chosen three books mostly at random from my bookshelves. You're going to choose one of those books. We're going to choose a random sentence from a random page. I'll read that sentence, and that'll be the first sentence in maybe a 2 or 3 minute long shit show of a short story that we just alternate sentences. So I've got, and a lot of these books, I don't even remember why I have them or how I got them. Donald Harstad's 11 Days, Peg Tire's Strangers in the Night, and Cara Black's Murder at La Villette. So choose one of those.
Oh, let's go with, is it Carla Black? I
Cara.
Cara. I've only
Yeah.
recently heard of her and I've been wanting to read her, so let's
Well,
do
there
it.
you go. We'll give you a one sentence taste of her work. Give me a page between 1 and 276.
89.
Okay, so I'm going to quickly scan 89 and find a sentence. I used to do it, and this might have been the case with you, where you would tell me the sentence to read, like give me a number, and that turned out to just be too onerous because sometimes it would just be like the sentence makes no sense. So I will take a look at it. Let's see. Okay, I'm just you do whatever you want with this. The smell of paper and wet dog clung to the room.
Smell of wet paper or
No, the
paper
smell
and
of
wet
paper
dog
and wet
and wet
dog.
dog clung to the room. But it wasn't enough to override a body that had been there for a week.
She shuffled in, leaning on her crutch, slowly making her way over to the corpse. The smell didn't bother her. It never had. As she got closer, she realized she didn't know who the man was, but she knew exactly how he died.
It came from her years running this hellhole of a hotel in this section of New York. People died all the time. She'd gotten used to it. This guy, though, there was something different about the corpse, something she recognized.
When there's no blood, when there wasn't any blood, it excited her because she knew there was some digging to do. She loved a good mystery. In this case, there was a little bit of blood, 3 drops coming from his right earlobe, but nothing else.
She bent down, still leaning on the crutch. For the first time in years, she felt a little thrill of excitement. Maybe this one would actually require her to use the skills she'd acquired so long ago, back when people recognized her genius. 3 drops of blood, no weapon. The door had been locked from the inside. Yeah, this was pretty good.
Oh, I think we call it there because it's such a great setup. My thought was like that. She leans in and smells his face, and
Ooh,
thinking like there's some kind of cyanide-ish, almondy.
poisonous. His
Yeah.
skin's a little red from what is that? Phthalimide, whatever. Yeah.
Well, what? So we're traveling together. Aren't we going to like Milwaukee or something?
Minnesota.
Minnesota. Yeah, yeah,
Stillwater,
yes,
right? I
yes.
haven't made plans. Have you made plans?
No, I was told I can go ahead and book a one-way ticket, and then Sourcebooks is arranging me to hit some other locations while I'm out there, but they haven't done it yet. So I'm just buying
Oh,
the
okay.
ticket to
Oh,
get
good.
out
I
there.
thought that was a little ominous. Carter, you'll only need a one-way
We
ticket.
we don't need you back. But it'll be fun, and I even just when we hang out personally, I want to hear more about the book. I want to hear more about your experiences and how you've been. So it'll be
Yeah,
good to catch
same.
up. You'll probably be sick of me at the end of it, but I think we'll have fun.
I think it'll be a lot of fun. See you
Thanks for your
soon.
time today, Barbara. So great to see you.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
So that is it. That is my second conversation with my buddy and friend Barbara Nickless. So her recent release, The Drowning Game, is out now. Run, don't walk to get your copy of The Drowning Game. You can read about it and about her at barbaranickles.com. And while you're at it, you can pop on over to carterwilson.com and you can check out my latest release, Tell Me What You Did, as well as sign up for my newsletter, check out other episodes of this show, and go to unboundwriter.com if you're interested in some of the coaching and retreat offerings that I provide there. Okay. That's it. Yeah, I'm recording this on it is December 19th, and I am taking a week and a half off from this podcast. So happy holidays, even though this is going to come out after that. And here's to 2025, and look for another episode coming out just next week. Take care.